At the end of the day, when you're talking about what all of this is about, everybody gets so hung up on this is like life or death. And I think it's important for everybody to realize, look, this is a game of baseball. Yes, it's a business. Yes, it's serious. Yes, everybody's trying to win. All of these things are true. But at the end of the day, like, enjoy it. Enjoy your life.
Have fun. Be curious. Like, soak it all in. You're not going to get this experience in all likelihood ever again. I mean, you should be looking at it as a chance to not only talk to teams about yourself, but also ask the teams questions about them, the things that you want to focus on in helping me achieve my potential.
Trev, so how do you deal with the heat, by the way?
I sweat.
Yeah, exactly. I bring that up because obviously we're in Arizona at the MLB Combine. This is you probably know better than I do. I think the fourth year.
2021 in San Diego was the first one, yeah.
Yeah, which you were at.
I was at that one, yes.
As a scout.
Correct.
Yeah. So what I want to talk about with everybody, I mean, there's a multitude of things I want to cover. One of those things, though, is giving them insight as far as like the MLB Combine goes. So when a family who, let's just say, has a kid who is invited to the Combine, we're talking about the top 300 to 350 so-odd players that get an opportunity to come here. And not every player actually accepts the invitation. From a scouting perspective, right, kind of leading into the Combine, is there something that you as a scout are really wanting to see from, like, what's like the behind the scenes look into you preparing for the Combine? Because I think, and I'm going to kind of preface it by saying, I think from a player's perspective, the expectation is, okay, look, I have this great opportunity to go to the Combine and, perform well in front of really every decision maker, I think is kind of the attitude, right? And what makes that interesting, though, is I think there's a different side of things from your perspective where I would love these people to really get an understanding of, like, is there really an opportunity for kids to come to the Combine and improve their situation?
Absolutely. I think to your first question or to your first point, coming into the Combine, we've, as a team, have done a lot of work on each individual player. So, it's a 365-day process. So that will literally begin, the next class for 2026 will begin the day after the first class ends, or the 2025 class ends. And so we have a lot of data points. We have a lot of scouting looks. We have a lot of touch points with the player and their families. We have a lot of objective data that we've accumulated. So all of that kind of comes together in kind of like a picture that we formed in our minds. Now there's still going to be questions we want to answer. And so a lot of the Combine, a lot of the benefit of the Combine from the team side, from the scouting side, is the chance to get in front of the players and ask them questions. There will be players, workouts on the field. Certainly those are important. Certainly it's a chance for players who may have questions about something within their game to answer, whether that be a position, whether that be how much impact they have in the barrel, whether that be their delivery if they're a pitcher. So certainly the on the field stuff plays into it, but a lot of the benefit comes from being able to get in front of the players, ask them questions, spend time with them, get some decision makers, quote unquote, who may not have otherwise had a chance to get in front of the players, or wouldn't, quite frankly, have had that chance to get in front of the players, so they can have that, that personal touch. I just had coffee with an assistant GM, and he's in 19 of them today. And I asked him why. I'm like, well, why do you like sitting in on all of them? And he just likes to have that. His answer essentially was, I like to have that personal feel so that when we talk about the player, I have something to reference. I have a data point that I can go back and reference, and I may have individual questions that I want answered. So from a larger, organizational standpoint, there's always going to be questions that you want to ask the player, that you want them to give their authentic response to in the moment.
And the reason why I think it's important that parents listen to you specifically, and the reason I didn't bring this up on the onset, is I wanted them to kind of realize, as they're hearing you talk about the combine, I think what happens is there's so many opinions that get thrown around and people don't know who to trust. The reason why they should listen to somebody like you is you were a scout for 17 years, right? You served in a variety of roles. Share with everybody a little bit about, you've experienced so much in the game. So when you come to a place like the combine and you're taking all of this years of experience, again, when you're watching, let's just say it's a pitcher, right? You're watching a pitcher on the mound. I think what's interesting is you have meetings going on, and then you have guys throwing and you have guys hitting, and there's all these things that you're juggling. How much of those on-field workouts are the decision makers actually able to see versus maybe just a handful of other scouts that are then coming back and like showing video, relaying information? Or are you literally all just saying, oh, wait, hold on, we want to go watch this guy. Let's all pay attention to this in the moment?
So that's an interesting question. And I think the answer has evolved over the years. So it started in 2021 in San Diego. And I remember being in the box, and it's, obviously nice stadium, open air, outside, and then inside we did the meetings. And people would literally want to step out to watch stuff that was going on the field. And within, as we went through the process multiple times, I think we kind of figured out that people that want to be in the meetings need to be in the meetings. They need to be where their feet are. They need to be present there. And then we'll have a separate group of scouts that are out doing the evaluation part of things. And a large benefit of the combine, as you know, is you get the objective data. So you get the exit velos, you get the spin rates, you get the extension for the pitchers down the mound. So you get all of those data points and the video. And so when quote unquote decision makers want to go back and, maybe watch something they missed, they can do that on video, and they have the data to back all of that up. And I think you and I have talked about this in the past. The good part of the combine is, coming to the combine anyway, is it's the last data point you're going to give as a player. So it's the last time you're going to get to be in front of 30 organizations to either speak, play, perform. And that impression you leave, just like any last impression, is one that carries over the following weeks as we lead up to the draft and we discuss the players. So there's a large part of it that is making a positive impression, again, be that with the data on the field, individually, with the athletic testing. Any one of those can then carry on the discussion in the following weeks leading up to the draft. And again, just like anything else, the last impression you leave is often the one that people remember the most.
Do you think there's a concern, or should be a concern anyways, from a player who, let's just say, has performed well throughout the year, right? And assume he's continued to get better every day, and he's being considered, there are plenty of rumors that get thrown around, mock drafts, but he's being considered in, like, let's just say, a top 100 pick, right? Is there a concern? Do you think there should be a concern for the player who's done so well to say, well, I don't want to go to the combine, because if I go to the combine and let's just say, perform well, like, is that really going to help me? But if I go there and I don't do great, or my metrics aren't what they were throughout the year, that somehow that, because it's the last thing they see, is going to be kind of a notch against me, or a knock against me rather.
Yeah, I certainly think that's a legitimate thing for players to think about. Now, the idea of coming to the combine and getting in front of teams, assuming that's something that you want to do, you want to come and be in front of people and talk to them. That is, again, assuming that's something you're comfortable doing, I think that part makes a lot of sense for players.
Yeah, and my personal opinion on this, when obviously, many players get invited, I've got guys here right now. I also have guys who decided not to come. the calculus for whether they should come or not, it's really, what have you done throughout the year? Who's been in to see you, right? If you want to be a top pick, like you need to be seen by a lot of these decision makers, right? And so let's just say the last look a decision maker had on any one of these guys was over the summer. And you've made these huge strides in the spring. And maybe there's been a handful of cross-checkers that have come in, but not any national guys, maybe not a scouting director. Yeah, here's an opportunity for you to show, how you've grown over the last, call it 9 months. Like that obviously just on the surface sounds like, well, yeah, that's a smart thing to do. I've always liked guys because, my goal, as much as it's to make sure the guy gets drafted as high as possible, takes care of the signing bonus, gets into pro ball, my goal is how do I make this guy be a successful big leaguer, right? That I think should always be in the back of a player's mind. And oftentimes I think it's not. And so my focus with the combine is, look, I don't ever want a player to feel like I'm going to hide myself or I'm going to convince a team to take me and maybe not be seen as much as I otherwise could have. For me, it's like, look, man, you got to throw it out all on the table. Because at the next level, if you don't have it, like you're going to get exposed and it's going to be quick. And so being reluctant or afraid of coming to the combine and showcasing what you're capable of, I understand why it would be a concern. I don't necessarily think that should be the driving factor. But at the same time, if you've got a guy who's considered to go in the top 10 picks, maybe you come here to meet and talk to teams, but I'm not necessarily going to come here and perform. Then that makes sense to me. So that's something that I think it's not necessarily a question. It's just more an observation that I think a lot of these families should be aware of and think about. And, a decision for one family and one player is completely different from another. So I don't think it's necessarily consistent across the board.
No, I certainly agree. I mean, everybody has their own, as you put it, calculus in terms of what they want to do and why. It may be that a pitcher has been shut down for a while. Like, you live out in California or you lived out in California. They've been done playing for a little while. Right. So they may have been shut down. So that doesn't make sense for them. Or maybe they haven't been playing as much as, after their season as what they feel comfortable going out and showcasing. All of those things are unique to each individual. And I certainly don't think that we as a scouting community fault any particular individual for not coming and performing at the combine. But I do think that the more people that show up and give the interviews, that does certainly allow the player to voice their own opinion or give their own voice to that process.
So let's talk about that because I think that's really valuable. So I want to go through what the combine looks like just generally, right? What does each day roughly look like? But before we do that, I want to talk about these meetings that these organizations have with these players, right? They last anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes. It's not with every player. It's a select few. They choose which guys they want to meet with. And so give everybody an idea of like a player walks into the suite. Generally, who are they seeing? Who are they meeting? And how does that meeting go?
So generally, and the way it works is the clubs submit names of players they'd like to meet with. And I believe the players give a list of clubs that they would like to meet with as well.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the clubs submit a list of players and I believe like a preferential order of who they'd like to meet with. And then MLB kind of...
Yeah, I mean, it's a puzzle. They're trying to put everybody together. Yeah.
MLB decides the schedule based off of a variety of who's requested them, what their other obligations are within the combine, and you get a list. And that list is constantly changing throughout the 5 days. But when they walk in the room, they're going to see usually the scouting director, national cross-checker, usually at least one, the regional cross-checker that's associated with where their locale is, and then maybe an area scout if they're out west. And then the questions can be, anything, right? I mean, again, it's as unique as the player, right? So it's whatever questions remain in people's minds that they want to ask them. Again, it could be anything from a pitcher, do you see yourself as a starter or reliever? Or show me your pitch grips. Or a position player, where do you envision yourself on the field? What position do you see yourself as? And then just getting to know the player. And I think a lot of times, we don't want scripted. We want to try to keep it as free-flowing and give the player the chance to have the floor and speak. And that's valuable for the player to be able to add their own touch of authenticity, their own voice to this process.
And so I think, again, from my perspective as an agent, meeting with players, a player has a meeting, obviously part of what you want to do is just give them insight. You want them to feel comfortable, right? But what you don't want to do is give them a laundry list of, hey, be this certain way or act this way. Because at that point, you're talking to an 18-year-old kid, or if he's in college, a 20-year-old kid, that's probably not going to end well if he's not being himself. So ultimately the goal is just go in there and be yourself, right?
No question. I think go in there, be yourself. The players this year, they're staying at the Biltmore, the big league hotel. Like, when are you going to get to experience this again? Go in there, be yourself, enjoy it, soak in the people, talk to the people, be curious about who's in the room, ask questions of the people in the room. It's not just a grilling. It's not an inquisition, right? You're not just absorbing the questions. You can ask them as well. So go in there and be an active participant. Enjoy it. Have some energy. Have a smile. You're sitting in this position. You're in a pretty good place. So
yeah, and I think a lot of players get so hung up on the performance on the field, like that's the only thing that matters. And while that is a very important component, and your projectability and your tools and all these things come into play, I remember specific players who, talent-wise, probably weren't first-round picks, but because their personalities and their persona and how bad they wanted it and all these different things, these organizations, when they met these players, would just rave about how great they were. And so I think about guys like that, and it's like, yeah, the guys like that, actually, funny enough, and there's a few guys that come to mind, were first-round picks, and teams actually said, Matt, it was the best meeting I've ever had. And so like that just shows everybody, like, there's an opportunity here. If you're a good kid, go be yourself, right? Like, at the end of the day, when you're talking about what all of this is about, and I think this is important, it's like everybody gets so hung up on this is like life or death. Oh my gosh, if I don't go in and impress and, become this superstar, like my life's over. And I think it's important for everybody to realize, look, this is a game of baseball. Yes, it's a business. Yes, it's serious. Yes, everybody's trying to win. All of these things are true. But at the end of the day, like, enjoy it. Enjoy your life. We had a conversation with a player yesterday, and it's making them realize, look, man, that you actually need to remember, you want to look back on this experience and be like, that was a fun time, whether it's at the combine or my high school season or high school in general. You don't want to look back and say, man, I wish I would have taken the time and like looked around and just really appreciated playing with my buddies.
Yep. Have fun. Be curious, and soak it all in. You're not going to get this experience in all likelihood ever again in this particular moment, in this particular fashion. And I think something you said earlier really resonates with me, in that it's not necessarily about this moment. We
trying to predict the future with all these players.
But as a clubs, we want big leaguers. We want guys that are going to play in the major leagues. Like, that's the game, right? That's what everybody wants. That's what the player wants. So to look at this thing as the end of something, I think misses the point. This is the beginning of something.
Yeah.
You should be looking at this at the chance of the beginning of something, not as the end final test that you have to pass in order to, get the diploma or whatever. It is the beginning of something, and you should be looking at it as a chance to not only talk to teams about yourself, but also ask the teams questions about them,
like
and
what?
What they think. What's your plan for development for me? Where do you see me? What do you think of my chances of being a starting pitcher? Or where do you think I fit on the field, and why? If I come there, what's going to be my unique development plan? What are going to be the things that you want to focus on in helping me achieve my potential? And we all want the same outcome, right? The clubs, the players, the agents. We all want the same outcome. How are we going to get there? So be curious, ask those questions.
And have you guys ever, as a scout, going back to your days as a scout in those rooms, have you ever seen a player do that in a really good way? Like, is there anything that comes to mind where like, oh yeah, this one particular guy, without naming names, he had some really great questions, and that you guys as an organization actually were able to answer all of them?
Yes, with each individual player and the way the question's phrased, I think a lot of times the way the question's phrased makes it sometimes easier or less easy to answer. But also from the club standpoint, there's going to be a little bit of a guarded factor.
That's why I'm asking, right?
Right?
There's some reluctance, like, oh, wait a second, I don't want to give you our player plan for you.
Right.
Or do you even have one at that point? Like, think about it. How many meetings, what's the most amount of meetings you were in with players at the Combine?
Oh, gosh. I bet I did 50 last year.
Okay, so 50 meetings. And if you were to get that question from 50 guys, there's no world in which you can answer all those questions. The ones that you said.
The ones that would have been under my direct purview, so to speak, I would have had an idea of where we wanted to go and what we wanted to do, at least from my lens, at least from my personal opinion, my personal perspective. How much of that, to your point, I would share would depend on a multitude of factors, including like how they phrase the question. Hey, where do you see me on the field?
This is the hardest thing, I think, for players right here, what we're talking about. Because you've got a player, the dance that we're describing, it's the business, right? Okay, so for an 18-year-old kid who isn't thinking about baseball as a business, he's been told it's a business, but he's not seeing it for what it is yet. He doesn't know what that's like yet. So he's coming in, and think about it. He's coming in genuinely like, hey, Trevor, so where do you see me on the field, right? And you're answering him. He doesn't know you're like holding back a little bit. He doesn't know that there's this guard that you have up because, well, for your guys' own reasons as an organization, like, look, we don't want to share this piece of information with them. He's going into a meeting right after, and he's going to tell this team what you just said. So what do you have to, like, that is the challenge, I think, for a lot of these players. It's like, how do you show them that?
You show them that by asking the question. So the point I'm making is whether you get the answer you're looking for, whether you get any answer at all, having that, showing that you're going to be an active participant in your own career, that you're curious about these things, that speaks volumes moving forward to the club on who you are. Like that you're thinking about these things. Because so many of...
Right, so the answer is almost secondary. It's like the answer doesn't even matter. The fact that you're asking the question says that you're thinking about it the right way.
Maybe you'll get something, maybe you won't. But yes, the fact that you're asking the question, the fact that you're curious about it, the fact that you're looking at this as the beginning of something and not the end of something you just have to get through in order to get to, your graduation date in the draft. It is the beginning of something. The fact that you're looking at it from that perspective, it's a matter of perspective. And if you can let the clubs know that that's how you're looking at it, and you're coming in and you're being yourself and somewhat naive, and you should be that. Like, you shouldn't be coming in as an 18-year-old who's looking at this as a business, you're looking at it as, I want to... You're not jaded yet. Yeah, you're not jaded yet. You're looking at it as though I want to start my career and I want to get to the big leagues, and I'm curious about how all this works because I don't know. That's all fair. Right. And if you can come in and be that genuine self and be curious, in those, they're not naive, they're just inexperienced. They don't know. So if you come in and you ask those questions, just those questions themselves show that you're thinking about things the right way. A matter of perspective. It's the beginning of something, not the end of something.
Right. So as far as the schedule goes for the Combine, I just want to touch on this briefly. Obviously, it depends on your position, right? Let's assume you're a pitcher. There's various things that you can opt into, opt out of. Right? So if you get invited to the Combine, basically you have an opportunity if you would like. They have a game that's played so you can pitch an inning there. If you don't want to pitch an inning, you can throw a bullpen on the field. If you don't want to do either of those two, then you can just make yourself available to meet with teams. But then they also have, vision testing, a medical testing component. They've got strength testing. And so assuming that you opt into all these, obviously your schedule is going to be pretty packed with all of those 5 different things, right? If you're a hitter, very similarly, do you want to hit in a game? Would you rather just take BP? Do you want to do infield work, outfield work, or do you just want to do the strength testing or the medical component or just meeting with teams? So these are kind of like, it's almost like a menu of things that you have the opportunity to do. Yeah, they don't make you do any of them. It's truly on you. Some players don't come. Some players come and just meet with teams. Some players come and just do the medical testing and meet with teams. There's a variety of things. So I think from an organization's perspective, you guys obviously would hope that everybody does everything, right? Because from an organization's perspective, correct me if I'm wrong, the information, you just want the information, as much information as you could possibly get, right? Okay, my next question is, so I remember talking to a scouting director, and this is before the combine, and they had been famous for having these pre-draft meetings leading up to the draft. And they would have them, 4 days before the draft. They would invite anywhere from 5 to 15 to 20 kids. And one year they didn't have it. And this was, again, before the combine. And I asked him, I said, hey, how come you guys decided not to do the workouts this year? And he goes, you know why? He's like, I got so tired of getting good looks on kids. And then we'd invite them to this workout and they just wouldn't show that great. And it's not that removed them from our board, but it was like, now there was this doubt where I was so convinced that he was going to be a guy we'd want to take with our first pick, assuming he's available. Like, this was my favorite guy. He didn't look great. And now I'm questioning it. And then, you see how it plays out. We didn't take him. He goes into pro ball. He becomes a dude. And it's like, I should have listened to my instinct and not worried about the pre-draft workout. How do you think the combine now, because now that's not the case. Now, again, because it's like, well, there's 357 kids here this year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's just get more eyes on them, give us more information, and let's take it to evaluate, right? Is that fair to...
Well, I think that's the thing that you're always weighing as a scout, as a club, from the workout last look, as we talked about, the last look and the last impression that you leave. The thing that you're always trying to balance within that is, yeah, but there were 364 other days in there that we, or 20 other looks we got at this player that may say something different. I had a former boss who used the analogy of Forrest Gump. It's the Forrest Gump. Like, if you watch it at one moment, he's a runner. If you watch it at another clip, he's a ping pong player. You watch it at another clip, he's in a war. And it's like all of that pastiche of things comes together and forms a film. And so you're trying to take the looks that you have throughout the year, and you're not trying to let just that one thing outweigh anything. And maybe it will put a seed of doubt in your mind. Maybe it should. Maybe it shouldn't. But that's, you're trying to predict the future. You're trying to look 3 to 5 years out and figure out what this individual is going to be in front of you. And part of that movie can be the workout. Like, part of that analogy of the Forrest Gump can be that workout. And again, you're always trying to balance and be objective with how much you weigh just that one impression at any given time. And then when you get into the room, not everybody has seen the player. So you're trying to give a sober, objective assessment of who you think the player is, or who we think the player is and why, based off of all of these combined looks. And that's really hard to do. Really hard to do.
So I had Chris Gross, the scouting director with the Mets, on a couple weeks ago. And we were talking about mock drafts. Great dude. Talking about the mock drafts. And he's like, what's interesting is, like, it's not like the NFL or the NBA where a lot of the mock drafts are pretty spot on. Maybe a guy gets taken a couple picks ahead of where they thought, but generally, like, a first rounder is a first rounder. Where baseball's, I would say, completely different, right? And one of the reasons that he gave was, this organization could go look at a kid and see something totally different than another organization coming in and watching the same kid. So using your Forrest Gump analogy, one organization may come in and only sees him as the runner, and the other comes in and just sees him as the ping pong player. And so or two different organizations, same player, totally different looks. One team has him in the, first and second round. The other team's like, oh, he's a 5 to 7 rounder for us. And so it's so crazy. And I think part of the problem for any kid or family, it's like, we're expecting 30 teams to be in on us. And it's like, well, no, right? Some organizations may go college. If you may be a high school player, they're going to go college, right? In the first round, they may be looking at pitchers and you're a position player. So it's like, there are all these moving parts. There's not really a question there. But what I would be curious to know from you, once we get past the combine, right? So we are, call it a month or so, a little less than a month away from the draft. What does the work look like from this point forward from an organization's perspective as they gear up for the draft?
So they will go from here into, this is largely speaking, we'll go from here into area scout meetings, area scout presentations, where the area scouts will present their lists of players, and the regional supervisors usually lead that. And the scouting director and some of the national guys will be there for that, as will assistant GMs most often. And they will sit in the room and they'll talk about their players. And then they'll go from there into usually a smaller group of meetings where cross-checkers get together and they discuss the players. And then they start forming the board from there. So they'll go into their quote-unquote war rooms or draft rooms, whatever you want to call them, and begin putting the board together. So the next month is when, everybody starts bringing all the information together. You start melding it all in together and trying to separate out the draft board.
And obviously part of determining the draft board, signability comes into play, right? When does the signability piece become what I would call necessary?
I personally think you're always doing signability up until the very end, because information as the draft unfolds, this is one of the things I think you and I spoke briefly about the other day. One of the things about going from a 3-day draft to a 2-day draft is that sometimes information changes. Sometimes as players don't get selected, or as players really start to think about what they want their futures to be, their signability changes in the moment. And within that, there's the opportunity when you had a 3-day draft to make phone calls, for the area scouts to get on the phone and make phone calls and find out, hey, how you just checking in, like, are you still in the same spot? So signability is a fluid thing. And I think from the scouting lens, you're always assessing signability, whether you're getting an actual figure from a player or from an agent or from a family. You're always kind of weighing all of the atmosphere of the player and what's going on, where they're committed, how much they seem to be, how strong that commitment seems to be to a particular college, how much interest they've shown in pro ball throughout the year. Could be something as similar as constantly sending out emails of when they're pitching or when they're playing. All of those things kind of give you the sense of where you think the signability is going to end up with a player. So it's not necessarily just about getting a figure. Yeah, you'd like to have that figure. But if you're just relying on that at, here on July the 17th or 18th and thinking, well, it's not going to change, that's what it is. No. Signability that's a living document, right? We used to have signability page. Like, that's a living document. That's something that needs to be updated daily as we go down the stretch.
So as an organization, put your scouting hat on again. How would you guys determine a player's value? Is it by looking at comparable players from years past? Because I know, like, in the industry, obviously, one of the benefits of comping guys out is, again, if you're trying to predict the future, it's like, this guy reminds me of this particular player, and that guy went on and he had some success. they're not mirror images of each other, but like there's a lot of similarities here. It helps you guys kind of like forecast the future, right? That's how I see it anyways. So as far as you guys placing a value on a player, every draft is different, right? There's different money that you have in your bonus pool to use. You know, if you guys, let's just say, didn't have a second round pick or didn't even have a first round pick, there's so many moving pieces with that prevents you guys from being able to do maybe what you did the year before or what you could do the year after. So how does an organization place a value of some level on a player?
Well, that's a loaded question. There's a lot that goes into it, obviously. So to your point about comps, I think that comps help you form within your own mind kind of how you see the player, and to the listener also set an expectation. So I think with comps, they can be very beneficial, but they can also be very misleading. And so you have to be real careful with how you're presenting comps within, especially a larger room, because it can set a false expectation. You may be the message you're trying to deliver may not be the message that's being received. Especially when you're, where I really found it hard to do is when you were setting comps within players within your own organization, because they're going to be stronger feelings towards that player. So you got to be real careful as you're trying to set comps in the context and the setting in which you're doing it. But that being said, they're also very useful in going, wow, this guy reminds me of this player. And then as you go through that own process in your mind of, okay, what does that mean? What does that look like? How did it turn out for him? Why did it turn out that way? What are the things I can learn from that with this player? That whole process is hugely impactful and beneficial. But then when you voice it within a larger room setting, it can also be a little bit, you got to be careful. You got to be careful within a larger room as you voice those, because it can, what you may be trying to say may not be what someone else is hearing, given the player, given the context, especially again, when they're within your own organization that you're saying it.
All right. So I'm going to ask you again. So let's just say you have a player who's being considered a top 3 rounder, right? And not in the first 15 picks. I'm talking about like anywhere from 35 to 65, right? Like kind of that range. And I know there's disagreements, obviously, in the scouting room with, well, this guy doesn't see him that high. This guy sees him lower. This guy maybe see him even higher. But again, how do you guys figure out, all right, this is the value that we have placed? Like, is that a moving target? Is it a range?
Yes. I mean, it's all of those things. I think as you talk about the players, as the board comes together within a room, they kind of gravitate. You get a better sense for, okay, let's put it like this. If you had a conversation with 30 teams right now about where they view a certain player, they may give you a range, but a lot of times that range is going to change as the board comes together.
Right.
So as that board comes together, you're constantly assessing new information or old information that's been said a new way, that's been viewed a new way. And ultimately you're comparing one player against another and deciding who you like better.
Yeah. So from our perspective, I just talked to Chris again about this the other day. So, I empathize with families because families they just want to know, like, how is this going to end up, right? Mm-hmm. And I think everybody, for the most part, when they're being guided the right way, they accept, all right, look, totally get it. Like, there's no world in which we can know how it's going to go yet. We still got a month left. But I do think it's important for them to hear what you just said, which is, even if we were to talk to somebody who is a decision maker right now, and they sound like they're high on you in this range, whatever it is, and let's say, the player, the family hears it, they had a meeting with the team and the team actually said, hey, we like you, we're not going to get specific with you, but we like you really high. And it places this expectation where, oh, wow, this is going to go good. What I want families to hear, though, is even that stuff can change. And it's not that they're going to go from I like you to I don't like you, but there's a difference between liking you and paying you $3 million and liking you and paying you $1 million, right? And so that's where part of what's going to start determining stuff too is, look, the draft hasn't started. Who's available, right? I mean, there are so many players, and I think it's so easy to be, because these families are insulated in their environment where their son is their sole focus, it's easy to lose sight of, like, there's a lot of players out there.
The universe of players, I mean, we used to call it back in the 50-round draft, the rule of 1,500. There's going to be 1,500 players selected, 30 teams, 50 rounds.
Back in the day.
Yeah. Dating myself.
Yeah.
This guy has a place on the board. So to your point, the entire universe of players, if there's 1,500 players that are going to go, you have to have a very big pool of players from which to select. And the universe of players from high school to college to junior college is huge, as you know. What I would encourage, certainly people that listeners of this podcast, as families, as players, as amateur players and families going through it, is you've done the hard part. The hard part's over. Like, now it's out of your control. The performance, the going through it, and then it's not even that, like, the part that you enjoy, that part's over. Now you just have to kind of take a step back and control the things that you can control. And that's hard to do, right? Especially when you're looking at it as your future and potentially, real dollars at stake within your future. That is hard to do, but that is all you can do. And to your point earlier about players and teams' opinions of them, no, the opinions of the player, like, yeah, we still like you. You're a high school pitcher, and we just took a high school pitcher with our first pick. So we don't have, that's probably not where, maybe it will be. Maybe it will be where we go, but it may not be where we go for strategic reasons, for reasons outside of just your ability and how much we like you as a player. And so a lot of those things that are completely external to things that you could, you could control, play into those decisions.
So I want to go back to one of the things when we were talking about the value, how do you guys place a value on the player? You brought something up that I think is an important point. So I have a ton of respect for all the scouts, and I envision in the scouting room or in these pre-draft meetings that you guys have, the area scout who's done so much work all season long, who wants to see his work mean something, right? He's being asked questions about these players in front of a room of his bosses. How intimidating can that be to have to stand up and say, let me give you here you go, here's all the information. I imagine that's a challenging thing. Because you almost feel like here's your chance, right?
The oxygen goes quick.
Yeah.
The oxygen goes quick. Yeah, I mean, it's a culmination. It's unlike anything else, Matt. I mean, think about it. In what other business do you work for, now 363 days,
right,
for 2 days? To call it the Super Bowl, almost doesn't even do it justice, because you've worked all this time, you've invested all these hours of energy, of miles driven, time away from your family, time away from loved ones, time spent with the people on your team, trying to get to, this crazy answer of what this 18-year-old is going to be in 3 to 5 years. And so, it's a big moment. It's a big moment to go into that draft room. And it's a big moment to see one of your players selected high or even selected low. But what I used to caution guys against is getting the pride in your work product tied up in whether or not we draft the player. Because again, it's the same thing, the same viewpoint from the player's perspective can be taken from the scout's perspective, which is there's a lot that goes into this. Yeah, we like the player. You did a great job. You did a great job by putting us in position to take this player. Take pride in that, because 29 other teams get a vote in this process. It's not just one. So take pride in your work product. Take pride in the fact that we're talking about this player. The reason we're talking about this player is because of the work that you put in at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end. And to get tied up in whether or not, again, very similar perspective to the player as the scout, to get tied up to whether we actually pull the trigger on drafting the player loses sight of the entire 363 days that went into this, in which you did a great job, in which the player went out and performed well, in which we liked the player. We enjoyed getting to know the player. We enjoyed the process. But 29 other teams get a vote.
Right. Okay, so it's draft day, right? And draft has started, and you guys are all doing your work, okay? And you guys are talking about it, and you say, okay, we want to take so-and-so with our next pick, right? How often are you guys not just calling that one player, but calling multiple players and figuring out, what if this guy says no to the number we just provided him? And they're calling 4 other guys, getting the answer. Because I know a lot of times what happens is teams will reach out, and they'll make what sounds like an offer. Will you take X, right? And you actually have to determine, wait a second, is this an official offer where I call you back and I tell you, yes, you're taking them? Is that what you're telling me? And oftentimes teams will say, well, no. So what that means is they're calling you, they're calling how many other guys, and they're asking similar questions. And then they're going to take all that information and say, okay, here you go. Here are the 5 guys that we just called. Which one are we taking? Did I just describe that?
Yeah.
Pretty well.
And by the way, oh yeah, somebody just took one of the guys.
Yeah, right.
Oh, another one just went. So now we're down to 3. And it moves fast. So you have to have options. You have to have options to pivot to should one player, in this case, get taken in front of you, or the player that you thought you wanted comes back with a number that you're not prepared to go to. Then you've got to have the next player and the next player. So you have to have options because it moves so fast. And night one, when you get, 10 or so minutes between picks, sometimes more depending on commercial breaks, it's allowed, you can move a little slower, but then you get into rounds 3 to 20 or 3 to 20, and it moves fast.
Bang, bang, bang.
It's bang, bang, bang. And you have to have options. You have to have good information to present to your scouting director so they can make the most informed decision. And there's nothing that feels worse than not having either the information or the accurate information. And at times it's out of your control. At times it is not within your control. But there is nothing worse than not having the information you need at the time that you need it.
So assume that you're a father of an 18-year-old kid who's going through the draft right now, and you have the experience that you have. You were just a scout for 17 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cross-checked.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you've seen it all.
Mm-hmm.
You're his father. What are you telling him, or how are you handling these phone calls? I want to give these parents some insight who don't maybe have advisors, or maybe they do, but they don't know how this whole thing works. And they don't really have much guidance. They're not really sure. They're not getting much clarity. How are you as a father, with your experience, handling getting a phone call from a team that doesn't make an offer, but just says, will you take this number, or what are you looking for?
Yeah. To make it personal like that puts me in a different frame of mind. I think that I'm telling them I'm being honest because there's not really any upside in the moment to doing anything other than just being honest and transparent. And then sometimes that involves because it's one club calling, sometimes that's not as simple. Sometimes that involves saying, hey, you should probably talk to my agent. You should probably talk to Matt, or you should probably talk to
yeah,
whomever.
for sure. I'm assuming, I guess for this example, right? Yeah, if you have an advisor, right, and you're getting a phone call as a parent instead of the advisor getting the phone call, I mean, I will flat out tell all these teams, like, my parents are not answering their phone. The player's not answering his phone because everything needs to be directed to us, because otherwise you're going to have multiple people calling. It gets way too confusing. And it's honestly, it's unfair. So everybody listening needs to understand, like, there needs to be not a chain of command, but a clear delineation of who's receiving the phone calls. And that's easy to do, by the way, right? Every player, every parent has the scout's numbers in their phone. So when so-and-so calls, immediately it's like, hey, the Phillies just reached out to me. Got it, on it, right? And so it's very easy to handle. But assume for a second this player doesn't have an advisor, right? And you're getting this phone call. I want these parents to truly understand, like, with your experience, I think it's valuable for them to hear, like, how you would handle that.
Yeah, I would just be honest. I don't think there's any, like, at that point.
I will say this. I think it's tricky when a team calls and does say, will you sign for this number? And that's all they say. To a parent who has they have nothing to compare this to, that to them sounds like an offer. They think that if they say yes to that they're going to get taken at that next pick. And when it doesn't happen, the parents are like, what just happened? And so I will say, I think every parent who gets that question needs to determine right away, is this an official offer? To where if I say yes to this, then you're taking them? And I've told teams, if the answer to that is no, if you're not making an offer, then I'm not getting the answer, because it's unfair. Because you know how this goes. Will you sign for X? Right? Is this an offer? No. Okay, let me find out. Okay, he would take it. They don't take him. Then they call back. They drop by $250,000. Will you take X? Like, that's unfair, right? So that's why for me, this is so important for players to hear and parents to hear. You just want to be clear. What is this that you just gave me? Is this an official offer?
Yeah. So it is what you're talking about is a fundamental hard part of the system, right? It is a fundamental hard part of the system that has been set up, which is, again, it's going to move fast. You have to have options from the team standpoint. It's going to move fast. You have to have good information and you have to have options. So that is going to involve phone calls like that in the moment, which puts parents who are taking those phone calls, who may or may not have representation, in a really tough position. So what I used to do is say, hey, listen, we're coming up on pick X. I'm not saying we're going to take you, but there's a chance. If we do, would you consider X dollars?
That makes sense. Then you totally understand the circumstance.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Where it gets problematic is where you said when somebody just calls and says, will you take X? Well, give me some more context here. What's like, is it an offer? Are you definitely going to take me? Is it the next pick? Is it the pick after? So I believe it's incumbent upon the teams and the scouts to set that context a little bit when they make those phone calls, and that's something I think that I think we tried to be very cognizant of. Yeah. In my time.
So I've gotten calls from directors who have actually said, will you guys sign for X? Is this an offer? No. All right, well, call me back when you have an offer. Mm-hmm. And they call back with an offer, and then I can get them an answer. But yeah, I mean, I understand from a team's perspective, and this is where it's a little bit of it's an interesting dance, because from a team's perspective, well, part of what they're trying to do behind the scenes is really figure out, like, what are our options, right? But I always tell families, like, look, if they're not willing to make you the offer, well, then someone else was there first. Like, if you were the first choice, then I'm going to bet they're going to want to make some sort of offer, whether it's below what they wanted to offer, right? On some level. Where it starts to get dicey is when you start getting deeper into the draft, where it's like a lot of guys are being considered generally the same. And now it's like, will you sign for $350,000? Was this an offer? Well, no, I just need to know because we know that these 5 other guys will. So I want to know that I can throw your name in that list, right? That's where it becomes more challenging.
Well, especially as you're moving down the draft and things are moving faster and, you have 20 different area scouts making phone calls for those picks. And you're trying to, again, line names up. And it's not anything nefarious or bad that's going on behind the scenes. It's just it moves fast.
Right. I don't think it's malicious. I don't think teams are intentionally trying to, create this bad experience for players and parents and manipulate. Like, I don't think that's going on. It's more a byproduct of the system.
Yeah. Quite frankly, it's a flaw in the system. Right. I don't think you're ever really going to fix it because otherwise we would have a 20-round draft that lasted 20 days. Yeah. And that's just not practical. So it's really not a flaw. It's just a hard part of
the draft is a flawed system. It really is. I mean, from a player's perspective, players have limited leverage. I mean, they have leverage, but I think you, as a player, you have to create the leverage that you ultimately have. At the end of the day, that you actually have. But the difficulty with that is people who don't have experience in doing that won't even see how they can.
Well, that's so to your point, to your question earlier, how am I handling it if I'm a father and I'm getting these phone calls? You don't know how the system works well enough to try to exert that leverage.
Which is why you're saying be honest.
Yeah, you'll probably just do more harm than good. I mean, yeah, you'll probably and your emotions and feelings are tied up in it, which makes it even worse.
Right.
So you're not looking at it from, the sober, objective lens necessarily. So yeah, I would say that just being honest and in the moment and asking clarifying questions to your point, like, okay, explain to me like what the context is here. Are you talking about this is an offer you're definitely taking with the next pick? Are you just trying to get a sense of where we're at? I can give you a sense of where we're at and what we're thinking without giving you a number. Asking clarifying questions and then being honest from there. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with asking clarifying questions. There's nothing wrong with asking whoever's on the other end of that phone, hey, give me a little context of what you're wanting to know here and what the consequences are of if I say yes to this, am I definitely going with the next pick? Or is this just information gathering? Yeah. But within that, like trying to do anything but then be honest is probably going to do more harm than good.
Well, listen, you spent 17 years in those rooms. You obviously have a ton of experience. We didn't even get into what you're doing right now, so we will have to have you on for a second round. But thankfully, because this goes live on Perfect Game TV, we have to stick within the time slot. So
it's been an hour already?
It's been an hour.
Wow. Talk about the oxygen in the room.
I love it. I appreciate you, buddy.
No, I thank you very much for having me. Really enjoyed it. Hope to come on again.
Yeah, you will.